Most of us have heard the saying, if you stop doing things the same way, the unexpected begins to happen. At first, it sounds like one of those motivational quotes people post on the internet, something that feels inspiring for a moment, and then disappears into the background of everyday life. But pause for a moment and think about it carefully. What if that statement is not just motivational language? What if it is actually biological truth? What if the way you live every day, your routines, your habits, your repeated actions, is literally shaping the structure of your brain? Because the truth is, it is. And the scientific word for this phenomenon is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity simply means this: your brain can change, not metaphorically, not emotionally, but physically. The connections between neurons, those tiny cells inside your brain, are constantly reorganizing themselves based on what you repeatedly do. The more you repeat something, the stronger the pathway becomes. The less you use a pathway, the weaker it becomes. In simple words, your brain becomes better at whatever you keep doing. That means something very powerful. It means your life is not only influenced by what you believe, or what you desire, or what you hope will happen. Your life is influenced by what you repeatedly practice, day after day, week after week, year after year. And here is the fascinating part. If you begin to break your normal patterns, even in small ways, you force your brain to wake up. You force it to adapt. You force it to grow. Think about how most people live their lives. They wake up the same way. They brush their teeth the same way. They drive to work the same way. They sit in the same chair. They eat the same foods. They think the same thoughts. They react to problems the same way they reacted 10 years ago. Routine becomes comfortable, and comfort becomes automatic. But automatic behavior is exactly what stops the brain from growing. The brain loves efficiency. If it can turn something into an automatic habit, it will. Why? Because habits save energy. When something becomes habitual, your brain no longer needs to think about it. It simply runs the program, just like a computer. But here is the problem. A life that runs only on old programs produces old results. The philosopher Aristotle once said something powerful. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. But if excellence can become a habit, then stagnation can become a habit too. And that is exactly where many people get stuck. They want change, but they keep repeating the same patterns. So what happens when you deliberately interrupt those patterns? Something surprising. Your brain begins to reorganize itself. New neural connections begin to form. Old pathways weaken, and new ones strengthen. And this is exactly what neuroplasticity is about. Scientists have discovered that the brain is not fixed after childhood the way people once believed. For many years, people thought the brain stopped changing after a certain age, but modern neuroscience has proven something different. The brain continues to change throughout your entire life. Every new skill you learn, every new challenge you face, every new behavior you practice, literally rewires your brain. Think about that for a moment. Your brain is not a statue. It is more like clay, constantly reshaping itself based on what you do. Now here is where things become interesting, because sometimes the changes that stimulate the brain the most are not dramatic life events. Sometimes they are simple, almost strange actions, small disruptions to routine, things that make the brain pause and say, wait, this is different. For example, try brushing your teeth with the opposite hand. If you normally use your right hand, use your left. Suddenly something very simple becomes surprisingly difficult. Your hand moves awkwardly. Your brain hesitates. Your coordination feels strange. Why? Because the brain is being forced to activate new neural circuits. It is being challenged. Another example. Put your shirt on in reverse order. Start with the opposite sleeve. Or turn your clothes inside out before putting them on, just as an experiment. You will immediately notice something. Your brain becomes alert. It has to pay attention again. And attention is one of the strongest triggers for neuroplasticity. Even something unusual, like walking backwards in your home, can activate different brain regions. Your brain must calculate balance differently. Your awareness increases. Your senses become sharper. It may feel silly, but neurologically, it is powerful, because novelty stimulates the brain. There is an old saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. It may sound simple, but it contains deep truth. Repetition produces familiarity, and familiarity produces predictable results. So if someone wants a different outcome in life, they must introduce different actions. Now, notice something important. This is not only about physical actions, it is also about mental patterns. The way we think, the way we interpret events, the way we respond to challenges can also become rigid habits. Someone who constantly expects failure begins to see failure everywhere. Someone who constantly expects opportunity begins to notice possibilities others miss. Why? Because the brain filters information based on repeated thinking patterns. In the Bible, there is a powerful verse that touches on this idea. In Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Notice the word pattern. Patterns shape behavior, and renewal happens when patterns change. Interestingly, modern neuroscience now echoes this ancient wisdom. The mind can be renewed, and the brain can be rewired. The psychologist William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, also said, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind." In other words, change the pattern of thinking, and life begins to change. But here is something important many people misunderstand. Neuroplasticity works whether the change is positive or negative. If someone repeatedly practices anger, the brain becomes better at anger. If someone repeatedly practices fear, the brain becomes better at fear. But if someone repeatedly practices courage, the brain strengthens courage. This means the brain is constantly learning, even when we are not aware of it. This is why small experiments with routine can be powerful, because they teach the brain flexibility. They break the automatic patterns that make life feel stuck. Imagine taking a different route to work, eating a new type of food, reading a book from a completely different subject, learning a musical instrument, speaking to someone you normally would not speak to. Each new experience adds another branch to the tree of your brain. And here is something fascinating scientists have discovered. When the brain encounters novelty, it releases dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical linked to motivation and learning. In other words, new experiences literally make the brain more receptive to learning. So when people introduce small changes in their daily routine, they are actually creating the conditions for growth. Think of the brain like a network of roads. The roads you use often become highways. The roads you ignore become overgrown paths. Most people travel the same mental highways every day. Same beliefs, same habits, same reactions. But the moment you choose a different path, you begin building a new road. And at first, that new road feels uncomfortable. Why? Because the brain prefers familiarity. Familiar patterns feel safe, even if they are limiting. This is why people often resist change, even when they say they want it. The brain says, stay with what you know. But growth begins where familiarity ends. There is a Japanese concept called Kaizen. Kaizen means continuous improvement through small changes, not massive transformations overnight, but tiny improvements made consistently. One small adjustment today, another tomorrow, another next week. Over time, those small shifts completely transform outcomes. Consider athletes. Elite athletes constantly introduce variation in training, different drills, different movements, different levels of intensity. Why? Because repetition without variation eventually stops producing progress. But variation challenges the brain and body, and challenge creates adaptation. The same principle applies to everyday life. When life becomes too predictable, growth slows down. The brain becomes efficient, but not creative. And creativity is born from new connections, connections that form when the brain encounters unfamiliar experiences. Albert Einstein once said something interesting. The measure of intelligence is the ability to change. Think about that. True intelligence is not simply knowing many things. It is the ability to adapt, to adjust, to rethink, to respond differently when circumstances change. And neuroplasticity is the biological foundation of that ability. Your brain is designed to adapt, but adaptation requires stimulation, and stimulation requires novelty. Which brings us back to that original idea. Stop doing everything the same way. Try simple experiments. Brush your teeth with the other hand. Take a different walking route. Eat breakfast in silence. Write with your non-dominant hand. Listen to music from another culture. Walk through your house backwards for a few seconds. Carefully, of course. Each strange little action whispers something to your brain. Wake up. This is new. And the brain responds. But the deeper lesson is not about brushing teeth differently. It is about remembering something powerful. You are not locked into the patterns you learned years ago. Your brain is not finished developing. Your mind is not fixed. Change is always possible. Always. This idea should be incredibly encouraging, because it means improvement does not require perfection. It requires experimentation, small changes, curiosity, a willingness to do something differently today than you did yesterday. The writer C.S. Lewis once wrote, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." And neuroscience quietly confirms that possibility, because the brain you have tomorrow will be shaped by what you practice today. So the question becomes simple. What patterns are you repeating every day? Are they patterns that build the future you want, or are they patterns that keep life exactly the same? Because whether we realize it or not, our daily habits are designing our brains. A new thought creates a spark. A new action creates a pathway. A repeated action creates a highway. And a highway eventually becomes your default direction in life. That is the quiet power of neuroplasticity. So maybe today is a good day to interrupt the routine. Not dramatically, just intentionally. Try one small change, then another tomorrow, then another next week. Watch how your awareness increases. Watch how creativity begins to expand. Watch how new ideas start appearing. Because the unexpected rarely appears inside rigid routines. It appears when the mind becomes flexible, when curiosity replaces automatic behavior, when patterns are gently disrupted. And perhaps that is why so many wise sayings across history echo the same idea. Change your habits, change your life. New paths reveal new destinations. Growth begins at the edge of comfort. Different words, but the same truth. So remember this simple principle. Your brain is always listening to what you repeatedly do. Every habit is a message. Every action is a signal. Every repeated behavior is an instruction. The brain responds accordingly. It strengthens what you practice. It weakens what you ignore. And over time, those invisible adjustments shape the course of your life. Which means something powerful. The smallest change today could become the beginning of a completely different future. All because you decided to stop doing everything the same way. Thank you for watching. If you learned something from this video, like it, leave a comment, and subscribe.